All right. Recording. Are live and recording.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. See a bunch of new faces coming in. Welcome. We'll get started in just a minute, everyone. You all see my screen okay, too? See some familiar names, which is exciting, and some new ones. All right. I am going to go ahead and get us started so that we can have enough time for our awesome dialogue today. But welcome, everyone. I am Eileen Coombs, the Community and Education Lead at Delegate Solutions, and I will serve as your MC for today. I am thrilled to welcome you to our collaborative live chat on growing 10X by taking your who, not how to the next level. Today, we'll delve into the thinking behind why 10X is easier and explore how you can apply the concept of who, not how to achieve exponential growth. We'll explore innovative ways to integrate the who, not how principles into your 10X hiring strategy to really change how you build your team, as well as how to harness new delegation strategies to create space for that 10X growth. And we are really lucky to have a seasoned panel of experts and authors with us to dive into these concepts. But before I introduce our panelists, I want to note that at the end of the session today, we'll have an exciting giveaway for one participant. To qualify, you must be present at the end of the session, and the lucky winner will receive a book bundle authored by our panelists. And that includes Emily Morgan's book, Let It Go, How to Finally Master Delegation and Scale Across Your Organization, Alec Broadfoot's book, Revealed, Insider Secrets to Hiring Your Number 2 Leader, and of course, 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan with Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Again, stick around until the end to see if you are that lucky recipient. And as I mentioned, we have a really talented panel of leaders from the strategic coach community joining us today, and I'd like to take a moment to introduce each of them. First, we are thrilled to welcome Dan Sullivan, co-founder and president of the Strategic Coach Inc. Dan is a visionary with over 40 years of experience coaching top entrepreneurs and is the creator of the Strategic Coach program, which helps ambitious entrepreneurs achieve 10X growth while simplifying their lives. He's authored over 50 publications, including 10X is Easier Than 2X and Who Not How. Dan is dedicated to the power of entrepreneurship. He is married to Bab Smith, his partner in business as well as in life, and together they own and operate Strategic Coach with offices in Toronto, Chicago, Los Angeles, and the UK. Also joining us from Strategic Coach is Shannon Waller, who specializes in entrepreneurial teamwork. Renowned as an expert, speaker, and coach, Shannon created the Entrepreneurial Team Program and co-authored Unique Ability 2.0. Her books, The Team Success Handbook and Multiplication by Subtraction, offer insights into entrepreneurial team success. And with a wealth of experience, she passionately shapes the future of strategic entrepreneurship. We also have two entrepreneurs and longtime coach members, Emily Morgan and Alec Broadfoot, here today as well, who have applied the concepts we're going to discuss in their journey by growing their businesses and are trusted resources to help you find great who's. Emily Morgan is the visionary and founder of Delegate Solutions and author of the best-selling book, Let It Go. Emily and her team help leaders finally master delegation through fractional executive assistant and project management services, delegation coaching and training, and efficiency consulting. Alec Broadfoot leads Vision Spark, a consulting firm that has successfully completed over 200 number 2 leader searches for entrepreneurial companies, many of whom run on EOS, and dozens of searches for other key team members with a 98% placement rate. He's also a sought-after speaker and the author of Revealed, Insider Secrets to Hiring Your Number 2 Leader. And special congrats to the Vision Spark team who were just recognized in the 2023 Inc. 5000 list as one of the fastest growing companies in the country. Really amazing. So we are in excellent hands today with our panel, and I, for one, am really looking forward to these discussions. Please remember to stick around until the end, see if you are the recipient of our book bundle. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon to get us started.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eileen. It's fun having the bios read out. I'm like, I forgot how accomplished everyone was. So Dan, thank you very much for joining us today. And I get to do something that is one of both of our favorite activities, which is to interview you on some of your most transformative ideas. And today we're really going to focus in on why 10x is actually easier than 2x, which is the subject of our latest best-selling book and part of the trilogy Behind My Head of Who, Not How, and the Gap and the Gain. And this kind of caps it off. We call it the Transformation Trilogy. And 10x is easier than 2x sounds incredibly compelling, but also could be confusing because most people are used to thinking about 2x as that's being a lot of effort and work already. So 10x would seem to be harder, but you're saying that it's easier. So how is it that 10x is actually easier than 2x?
Well, 2x is really a lot of work.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think the big thing is there's a concept that's been around for a century called the 80-20 rule. And so if you look at your present situation, how much you've accomplished right now, you can consider that the 80% is what got you to where you are, but it's not going to get you any further. But there's a 20% that you're doing, your team is doing. There's 20% of your clientele who are ready-made for 10 times. But the big thing is now to remove yourself from the 80% as the entrepreneur and then get your key team members to remove themselves from the 80%. And all your focus is on growing the 10 times company. So you have two companies. And you have the 80% company, which guarantees your present revenues, but you can't push that any further into the future. But there is a 20% of your company, and so there's a shift of mindset. But the first person who has to do it is the entrepreneurial owner themselves. You can't ask your team to go 10 times unless you, as the entrepreneur, go 10 times. And that's a matter of probably eliminating a lot of things that you know how to do. You're good at them, but they don't really give you much spark anymore. So that's what I've done. So, for example, I mean, I'm probably spend 95% of my time in the 20% company, the company that's being created. And and then there's team members who are, in direct support for me. And so that's just to give you a structure for thinking about it, that that every company has an 80-20 at any given time, but the visionary should really be the lead dog in creating the new 10 times company.
And I really like this model that you've come up with, Dan, that 2x is incremental progress, which is harder, longer. I always love Joe Polish's term, hard, annoying, lame, and
Well,
frustrating.
you're trying to pull the past into the future, and that's really hard.
Yeah, it is really hard. So there's only 20% new in that incremental model. And what's interesting, and that we've proven this in the workshop, and actually Alec and Emily are going to be great examples of this very shortly, is when you want to go 10x, which we do it in a great exercise called the 10 times mind expander, you add a 0 to last year's revenue, which usually makes everyone's eyes go, how's that going to happen? I call it the mind bender sometimes. But that means you actually have to reinvent and do things very, very differently. So as you said, it's 80% new thinking and only 20%. So how do people go about compressing down that 20% and creating capacity for that 80%?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to actually do the math, and you simply take your and you can use your top line here, your bottom line. I prefer the bottom line, but you have to have a top line to get the bottom line. But just say your top line, so the gross revenues. And so you would say, I'm doing, $1 million, $2 million right now as a total company, and therefore we'll just pick 1 million. We'll say we're going to do 10 million. Okay. And that, for the first time, it actually puts the thought in your mind of 10 times. And, it's a new creature that you're creating. So it needs a lot of life support when you first started off. But then you say, well, and you do this, what capabilities do we already have that if we refocus them, they would support a 10 times larger? And the big pushback, and this is just a discovery. I'll be a coach next August 15th. I'll be coaching entrepreneurs for 50 years. So I started in 1974. And it's just a general assessment. I've coached 7,000 entrepreneurs, and our company has coached, we're closing in on 25,000 right now. And the biggest problem of goal setting for entrepreneurs is not the goal itself, it's actually their time frameworks. So I had this one client and I said, just take your present, your present best right now, and multiply by 10. And they did that. And I said, so what do you think? And he says, well, 10 times, I can't do 10 times in 3 years. And I said, I didn't say anything about 3 years. Actually, I'm going to give you 25 years. He said, 25 years? I don't need 25 years. I can do 10 times. And I said, really? How long would it take you? And he said, 15 years. And I said, isn't that great? You get 10 times in 15 years and you get 10 years change. What would you do with the 10 years, with the extra 10 years? And he said, I'd do it again. So wait a minute, you're having trouble with 10 times and now you're talking 100 times. So you can see it's just how you're framing things. And entrepreneurs don't drive themselves crazy with their goals. They drive themselves crazy with their deadlines. They're always demanding deadlines, which are truly unreasonable. And they almost have a point of pride in how crazy their deadlines are. I give myself lots of time in the future. I mean, you own the future. I mean, nobody else knows what your future is, so you can do anything. But I say, you want to have a great life while you're doing it. You want to enjoy the work you're doing. So that's just a couple of frameworks, the 80-20, but then also what's the time frame that you would give yourself for 10 times? Okay. And usually there's a shift that goes on. The moment your brain entertains a new thought, it starts looking for, what is it that's resonant with this larger goal? And what is it that was great to get us where we are, but it's not going any further?
That's interesting, Dan. I love that question. What's resonant with that goal and what isn't?
Yeah.
And one of the things, and I know this is of optimal interest for everyone here, is there are business processes and technologies and things like that fit into it, but there's also people. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about the people component of growing 10X.
Yeah, and this is really, where Alec and Emily, where they come in, because I'm a visionary, and strangely enough, in our company, we have two visionaries because my wife is a visionary too. So we've had to configure it very deeply. Babs is the visionary for the company, and I'm the visionary for the program. So we have a coaching program we're in our 35th year now. So it's like theater. If you think of a live theater, she's responsible for the entire theater. She's responsible for everything that goes into the theater until you can have a performance. And then there's the actual performance of the theater, and I'm in charge of what goes on stage. And we have a strict division of labor, and so we operate in two completely different frameworks. But in the creating of the company, she's a visionary, so she needs integrators that help her communicate not backward, but to communicate the vision of the company to the team. And I'm always communicating the vision of the program.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have my integrators in relationship to the program.
Mm-hmm. So really it's interesting because I think there are team members who really gravitate towards that 10x thinking,
Yeah.
and they're open and willing and wanting to transform and to multiply. And then we all know that that's not true for everybody. So,
Well, yeah, and there are some people. I mean, we have one team member. She's, I think, 27 years with us, and she's in charge of the entire quality control of the database. And she did that, in her first year in the program. She's been doing it for 27 years. And the integrity and the quality of the database is always necessary, regardless of how big your organization is. So there are certain people, who they have like always useful jobs, and I don't bother them. I don't bother them with 10 times or anything like that. I mean, leave them alone. They're always going to be crucial, so just don't fool around with them. And anyways, but there are other people who have real growth aspirations in terms of what they're doing in the company. They have growth in terms of new skills, new capabilities, and you play with the players. You just find who are the real 10 times players. You're always going to have an 80% of as you're moving towards 10 times, you're going to always have an 80% of your company, but it'll be a higher level 80%.
Interesting. So I would love now to jump into Alec and Emily, your stories about 10x, because obviously you've had this experience in coach of 10x and the mindsets of thinking, or the shifts in thinking. So Alec, let's jump in with you, and I think we can stop sharing this slide. So Alec, tell us what this 10x is easier than 2x thinking has done for you, what you changed, because you made some pretty fundamental shifts in your whole business strategy and your own level of support that I would love for other people to know. I got to hear about the other day, but I am like, whoa, you did what? And I think it's fascinating.
So my organization, we used to help all entrepreneurial companies hire all positions. And, recently going through the 10X program, we decided to really hone our messaging and our services and focusing on that number 2 position, that integrator role, and the other leadership team positions. So that was a big shift for us. And going through the 10X program, one of my takeaways is I came back from Chicago and I wrote on my whiteboard, or actually my assistant wrote for me, is this a 10X or 2X? And so we put everything under that vetting system. So, someone wants to meet with me, they want to have coffee. Is this a 10X conversation or a 2X conversation? Or I come up with a new business idea, a new service idea. Is this a 10X idea or a 2X idea? So that's one of the things I do that has transformed my thinking. The other is the whole concept of who, not how, and unique ability, right? So Dan, you define unique ability as something that motivates you and fascinates you. And I realized, I was selling for my company. I was the primary salesperson. And I realized for my company to grow and scale, I was not the best person. So I hired a salesperson. And then, Dan shares a thought with us, and it's how many key hires are you away from having a self-multiplying company? And it may be worth those of you that are listening to write that down and just kind of think through that. How many key hires are you away from having a self-multiplying company? And so I realized, I saw my clients having transformative experiences. They had a lot of fun and freedom and impact because they had that number 2, that integrator role. And I'm thinking, well, at first I was thinking I was a little too small to have a number 2 myself. I'm like, you know what? That's head trash. So I hired my own number 2. And so we've seen our company continue to grow. We made the Inc. 5000. I was in San Antonio a couple of weeks ago. And that's been absolutely transformational, the type of thinking and what it's done for my organization.
Congratulations. And I think the thinking that you just described, right, it actually is that not trying to be all things to all people, really getting focused on who do you want to be a hero to, another great concept we have at Coach, really making sure you so thoroughly understand their goals, their dangers, their opportunities, and their strengths. And then really from your perspective and how your unique ability and how you create value, just being the very, very, very best service provider, for lack of a better term, but the very, very best solution. And that gives you, Dan, as you've always said, a value creation monopoly. And I'm sure that like you just cut away the chaff, right? It's you're only with the most essential information. So you've doubled down on the types of organizations that you want to work with. You've doubled down on the positions that you want to be specialized in. You yourself got leveraged and supported by great who's, and then the results are there to show. So that's exciting. Congratulations. Mhm. Emily, let's jump to you. I mean, it's Delegate Solutions, who we've known each other a long time now, which is really fun. And I've seen you've made you made your own shifts that are quite differentiated from where you started as you evolve towards your 10x in terms of who you provide for people, which I can't wait for you to explain. So I've always known you as someone who provided just really, really great support solutions in terms of people, but you've really expanded your offerings. Can you share about that?
Yeah, I was going to actually share a story to show kind of how we've incorporated these concepts as we've had to make decisions. So I started Delegate in 2006, and it was really like the Wild West era of the virtual assistant industry. We were building the plane as we're flying it, and like every year for a decade, we were growing 30, 40%, even in recession times, right? Like, not that we were the only game in town, but it was our game, and we were like, we had written the rules for it. Well, then COVID happens, and overnight that dynamic shifts. And I go from having these conversations around how do we possibly work virtually and how does fractional staffing work, to all of a sudden everybody was forced to really master those skills. And because of this, new VA providers really flooded the market, and it started to dilute the product and the results. And it created this decision fatigue that our buyers were trying to alleviate just in hiring services like ours. And it really became this transactional purchase. And we found ourselves, as Dan would teach, in the commoditization trap. And there was blood in the water. And because we had done that kind of work in the coach classroom, I knew that that was not the kind of entrepreneur that I wanted to be, where I was having to try and stand out in a red ocean, oversaturated market. And, also from a philosophical standpoint, being more of an expert on delegation, I really saw that it was becoming a huge problem where the industry was going, because delegation is complex and human, and it's not transactional. And so this sort of idea that we're going to price shop and impulse buy with support creates this disruptive failure that becomes really hard to undo, and it starts to erode and hinder the delegation process long term, and really erodes trust in delegation as a whole. So not only was I like facing this philosophical challenge, but the industry was sort of transforming before our eyes. And the way that we brought this concept into play is, we asked ourselves, what impact do I need to make as an entrepreneur that is new, unique, and special? It aligns with our vision and mission, and could also create 10x growth opportunities. So we went back to the fundamentals, and we said, who do we want to be a hero to and why? We rebuilt our buyer personas based on that. And we asked ourselves, what do these people need and how can we help them? From there, we ran DOS conversations with key clients to make sure that I was understanding what their dangers, opportunities, and strengths were. I started going back onto discovery calls to really study these pain points and ensure that we're building something that actually mattered to that. So then, of course, as we went through all this, we asked ourselves, what does 10x growth look like beyond the virtual assistant? And how do we take these skills and thought leadership and reputation that we've developed and apply it in innovative ways to the target buyer? And our 10x leap was with our new personal project manager program. So this program was really designed to solve this need that we've heard Dan and Shannon and all of you guys talk about, that as the entrepreneur, you make it real, but you need someone to make it, or you make it up, but you need someone to make it real, and then you need someone to make it repeat. And so typically the EA or the VA makes it repeat, but they're not the ones who help make it real. So our new PPM offering is all about our project is you, and our goal is to help you make it real. And we do that in 90-day delegation sprints with a mix of strategy, coaching, accountability, and execution. So all of those decisions really align with our mission to create freedom and impact. And, we looked at other areas where we knew we could be a who solution to our target buyer that would also be 10xable. And we landed on team efficiency consulting, which Eileen Coombs, our MC today, heads up. And she can share some links to those. And then me and Alec are working on a collaboration with Vision Spark that we hope to launch soon as another opportunity. So all of this was a 10X mindset that we sort of reverse engineered to how we're going to get there based on what we know, who we want to work with. So, and then one more thing. And then I brought who's in like Eileen to help make it real, because I know that I'm a great starter, but I'm a terrible finisher, and I needed that support around me. So that's just a few ways.
That is such a powerful story, Emily. Thank you. And I didn't even know all of it. So that's very cool to get caught up with you in that regard. And what difference are you seeing? Because 2020 and you know, getting into that commoditization trap, especially when you've been out of it, is not an enjoyable experience. So what are you seeing the difference between where you were in that COVID lockdown period and the transformation of the industry and where you are now? What's your sense of the future? What's your personal sense of happiness and freedom and impact? What impact has it made on you?
Excuse me. Yeah, I think we're trying to focus on high performers and what the future of delegation looks like. So we just actually gave a talk on it 2 weeks ago at FIM. You know, where are we going with delegation? And I think it's largely going to be about whole person. So we're not just delegating professionally, we're delegating personally. It's going to be about strategic delegation, like how you're actually going to move these key things forward in your business or outside of your business. So lots of different who solutions there.
Very cool. And has it impacted your personal happiness in terms of this 10X framework?
Absolutely. I mean, it gave us sort of a decision. That's what I love about Coach. And like, it's just so embedded into the DNA of how we think about things. Like, it's a framework for how to think about addressing and thinking through some of these challenges. So it was just nice to have that resource.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you both for sharing that. And thank you for both being such phenomenal who finders. The fact that we have you guys to refer, pardon me, you know, and say, hey, if you want, now I know about the personal project manager. So it's like, if you want this, if you want a virtual executive assistant, if you want a number two, if you want a really successful team leader, you guys cover the gamut, which is kind of epic, just saying. Dan, I want to tap into you for a moment, because we've been talking about who, not how for a few years now, but if you could talk about where the who, not how concept came from and just how strategic and pivotal it is to 10X.
I stole it.
Excellent. Tell us more.
So I have a great podcast partner, Dean Jackson, who's he's an amazing marketing genius, and he's been in Coach probably, I don't know, 15 years or so. And there are certain people you just connect with right off the bat, and Dean and I just chat anyway, so we just decided to record our conversations. And we have almost identical Kolbes. So those of you who are familiar with the Kolbe framework, I'm a 2-2-10-4, so I'm a 10 quick start, and he's I think he's a 2-2-10-2. You know, he's a 2-10-2, and but I was talking about that procrastination is actually a form of wisdom. That and a lot of people, procrastination has a bad name. It's like, you know, everybody's got a secret life that they keep hidden, that they're a procrastinator. And I said, I think there's something wrong, since all human beings do this. I think there's something wrong where we're talking about something that's wrong. I think what procrastination is, that you're really good at setting goals, but then when it comes to the actual execution of the goals, you something in you tells you, I just don't want to go through this. I just don't want to go through this. So you procrastinate, and then you get a bad name and you try to hide it. And I said, I think procrastination is actually a form of wisdom based on your entire life experience that tells you there are certain things that you love doing and certain things that you don't like doing. And so Dean was in Toronto for his workshop, and I told him, just tell everybody what you said there. And he said, you know, you have the what that you want to achieve, but you don't want to do the house, so you have to find a who to do the house. And and so it's Dean's idea, but I have my IP lawyer on speed dial. So the moment I said, are you going to do anything with this idea? And he said, no. I said, well, I'm going to turn it into a tool. So when he was in the workshop, he just described it, and I actually drew the diagram. I'm a trained artist, so I drew the diagram on the smartboard, and it just connected. Everybody just said, "Oh my God, can I start my life over?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, you look at anybody who's who's anything in the world, and they have a lot of who's around them who do the hows." And anyway, but it just took off. It was just one of those 3-word terms, and then I turned it into I create a book a quarter. So when I'm 70, I decided to create 100 books in 100 quarters, and so we're in quarter 37. I'm doing book 37, but it was one of our quarterly books, and it just landed. And then we got a publisher, Hay House, who loved the idea, and we did that, and it's a bestseller, and so it really connected with a lot of people. It's just instinctive to entrepreneurs that there's just a lot of hows that you don't like doing, but you beat yourself up and you say, you've got to do this. And it's the reason why small businesses are small, because the founder keeps wanting to do all the hows, but there's no room for the future if you're doing all the present hows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of your early concepts, Dan, is the ceiling of complexity. Mm-hmm. and we talk about the ceiling of complexity, if I go this way, and then you hit a ceiling because there's only so much that any one individual can do. It doesn't matter how good you are, how smart you are. There's only so many hours in the day, and you start to experience the law of diminishing returns, and then you have to make that shift to unique ability teamwork in order to actually get to break through that ceiling and to reach. So that was a very, very, very early version without the name of Who Not How. And it's interesting because Alec and Emily, and part of the reason why we connect is my passion is unique ability teamwork, not regular teamwork. Let me be clear: unique ability teamwork, where someone is as passionate about what they are good at doing as you are about what you love doing, but it's in a completely different area of expertise. And then how can you work really, really well together to make that a seamless experience? So Dan and I get to have some fabulous unique ability teamwork quite often.
Yeah, I just want to make I've made a distinction, and I don't know how Emily and Alec look at this, but there's a distinction in my mind between delegation and who not how, because a lot of the way that entrepreneurs look at delegation is that they're going to free themselves up, but it's someone who's not as good as they are. And they have to train the person, they have to manage the person, they have to monitor the person, they have to motivate the person, and they know down the road they're going to have to fire the person. And this is just the worst set of hows that entrepreneurs can possibly imagine. So my whole attitude is that the who is actually much better than I am in the thing that I'm giving up. I mean, and I don't have to tell them how to do it. They already know how to do it. They just want to be set free to do it. But the big thing about entrepreneurs, as distinct from people who work for ideas, that I'm making up a number here, but I would say 80 to 90% of talented people in the world cannot give a purpose for their talent, and entrepreneurs give purpose for other people's talent. And that's the job of the entrepreneur, to create a vision for the person's talents that they can constantly grow, and increasingly with great freedom.
Entrepreneurs give purpose to other people's talents.
Yeah.
Excellent. Emily, I'd love for you to jump in because you're an expert in delegation, an expert at who's. What is because I think from what I know of you, that's similar to your perspective. You might just talk about it differently.
Yeah, I think there's a big misconception that because you don't like doing something, someone else won't like doing it. And so I think that's another way of saying what Dan is saying.
Yeah.
I remember being in class one day with you guys, and Dan, you were saying, like, instead of focusing on trying to get better at the things that you're not good at, redirect that energy into the things that you are good at. And so you'll be much more happy and much more successful kind of taking that approach in. So that was what's standing out to me while you were sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. If you work your entire life on your weaknesses, by the end of your life, you have some really powerful weaknesses.
There you go. So delegate your weaknesses to
Mhm.
people that are strong at it, I guess.
Mhm. Alec, what's your take on this and who's and delegation? What's your perspective?
Yeah, knowing your unique ability, I think, is really important. And it frees up any guilt that you have from delegating, right? So if you know your unique ability and like, why am I doing this? I'm not the best at it. And so when you have something that needs done, you delegate it to a great who, or you find a who for it, or you find a who that knows a who to get it done. And so, who not how is a transformative concept. It's freeing. A lot of entrepreneurs that I coach, that I work with, when they're struggling, like, do I need that number 2 leader, right? And I've been doing both the visionary and the COO, the integrator work. And some of it's guilt and some of it's a purpose issue. Like, what am I going to do? Right. But if they know their unique ability and how they can have their greatest impact. And so, one individual I was coaching, and once she was free from this concept, she said, okay, let's go. I'm ready to hire my integrator. And she hasn't looked back and has been super happy since.
I want to jump into what you brought up, Alec, and this is actually a question we asked some of you before you joined the webinar today, is what obstacles do you face? What gets in the way of you thinking or growing 10x? And one of the things that people said was themselves, which I thought was it's like we're our own worst enemies sometimes. So Dan, years ago you wrote Going Against Gravity. 40 different obstacles, I think, to growing 10x. But what do you see as what gets in people's way of growing 10x, and what are some of the shifts in thinking people can make?
Yeah, and what's the entrepreneur's role? I think the biggest thing is they never quite understood the entrepreneur's role. And, and I think part of it happens just the way that most entrepreneurs get started, that when you start a business, it's basically you're the company and you have to do everything. And I think it gets hardwired at an early stage. These are very nervous years, the start of an entrepreneurial career, and the statistics on, of how quickly businesses fail. You're under a lot of pressure. You're under an enormous amount of pressure. It's short-term pressure, it's cash flow pressure, and everything else. And it gets hardwired that you're the one who has to do everything. I think that. And the other thing is there's a confusion in entrepreneurs between being in control and being in charge. I'm not in control of anything in Coach. I'm in charge of creating the new tools. I'm in charge of creating the new ideas. But there's a difference between charge and control, because charge means you're creating something new. Control means that you're maximizing what already exists. Okay. So I'm not a manager, and fortunately, I've had enough evidence at an early stage to convince me that I'm a manager. But I'm a great innovator, and I'm a great starter, as Emily says. I'm a phenomenally good starter, but I'll get anything started, but I won't finish anything. So I have to have a lot of people around me who do this. So I just see myself as a particular role in we have 130 team members, but I'm just one of the team members who has a very specific type of entrepreneurial unique ability that allows me to create certain things. And but unless everybody's unique ability is involved, none of it works. Things don't get followed through, things don't get completed. So and Babs is not in control either. Babs is in charge of having we have 12 teams inside Strategic Coach, and she's in charge of giving energy and giving direction to the 12 team leaders. They're in control. They're in control of it. But I mean, one of the great distinctions, and it's from Gino Wickman, who created EOS, was this difference between the visionary and the integrator. And I think it's one of the most remarkable management distinctions ever made. And you can see large corporations that haven't pulled it off. They have a visionary, or they have an integrator trying to give vision. And I think the visionaries shouldn't be integrating, and integrators shouldn't be doing the vision work. They're two totally different talent sets, and so I think there's just a series of very fine distinctions that if you make them and you act on them, all of a sudden you get a burst of growth. Okay, and but everybody takes their cues from the person who's number one. All the cues come from number one. If you're not freeing yourself up, they're not going to free themselves up.
That's a great point. Dan, one great question we have in the chat from Andrew is, how does one work through needing the who, but not being in a financial position to hire it? And I know I have my own experience of this. So it's like you see the need for a who, but you don't feel like you can afford it yet. What's your coaching on that?
Well, I think, Emily is really pioneering this, and I think, Alec, you're pioneering this too. How much do you need this person? So there's fractional. I mean, we have a fractional CFO and we have a fractional chief marketing officer. Okay, and they have other customers where they're fractional managers, and that's a great bonus because they have active knowledge of a lot of companies that are moving forward. And so in today's world, especially with virtual communication, you can have all sorts of people who are part of your team, but they're not geographically with you. And I suspect that's the case between Emily and Eileen. You're you're different, but all you're asking for is the person's best ability directed towards certain projects, and they're working on it, and you don't have to be paying attention to it.
I want to add, totally true. And the fractional and the virtual just makes it a lot easier, a lot more accessible. There's one other factor as well. And I know this because when I had my own team and I was paying for them, and it's actually my very first team member, and I was sharing a part-time resource with another salesperson, and she wanted to hire someone else. And she said, "Can you take over this person?" Remember, this was part-time. And I hemmed and hawed for over a week. I'm like, I don't know if I can afford it. I don't know if I have enough work, all the things. So finally I bit the bullet and I took her on. And 3 weeks later, I said, "How soon can you go full-time?" The leverage was so profound. It freed me up to do what I was best at. It got me out of tons of things. The thing is, we haven't talked about this yet, but when you're not great at something, you take a lot longer to do it. Like me doing anything administrative, anything fact finder, anything follow through is slow and painful on a good day. And yet when I'm freed up from that with someone who can just do it a lot more quickly, a lot more efficient, effective, and productive and profitable, all of a sudden I was making more money because I'd made that investment. So I'm not sure if that's useful, Andrew, but I know for me, it was a profound lesson that the little bit of investment to leverage me, all of a sudden I couldn't wait to make a bigger investment and end up with a team of there were 6 of us at the end. So just really, if you're investing in the right person to leverage you to generate more revenue, it will pay off in spades and probably much more quickly than you thought. Alec?
Shannon, yeah, I just want to reiterate that, the old expression that A players are free, right? So they're going to pay for themselves. I know, especially if you're a growing entrepreneurial company, you're small and you're thinking, how am I going to afford this person? A really good top performer is going to pay for the salary. And I actually disagree with that statement. A players are free. I think A players will pay for themselves 3 to 5 times of what you pay them. And so, and I talk to entrepreneurs who are ready to take that jump and hiring that integrator. And I've never had one client come back to me and say, you know what, our profit was down the following year because we had that new salary of an integrator. That's never happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a story from the early years. This is the 1990s. And I had this man who was third generation banking family from Kentucky, and they had four banks. And and he came in to coach, and and we started talking about the activities that entrepreneur, things that are going to grow you and things that are going to keep you from growing. And he said, well, there's one I just can't give up. And my grandfather did this and my father did this. And that is you have to personally write 30 personal letters to your clients every week. And I said, write. And he said, well, type. He says, I'm a typist, so I type these. So I said, given how many hours a week? And he says, well, I try to do it at night and weekends. So maybe 20 or 25 hours. And I said, have you grown the company since you took it over from your father? And he says, no, but I've maintained it. But I said, but obviously you wouldn't have joined Coach if you don't want to grow. And he said, yeah. And I said, so I said, to get a really top-notch executive assistant who was a better typist than you, this is still typing days, and and who kind of got your voice and they understand the clients and everything else. I said, what would that cost you in Kentucky? This is 1990s. And he said, 40,000. But he says, I can't really afford the cost. And I said, well, it is a cost unless it frees you up. I said, I mean, I wouldn't take on $40,000 if it didn't free me up. And I said, when you pay someone $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, the investment is not in them. The investment is you. That if what you were saying, Alec, there, if this person comes on and just takes care of all this stuff, how much do I get freed up? So the investment isn't in the other person. The investment is in you. The question is, are you worth the investment? And a lot of entrepreneurs aren't worth the investment because they don't have any big goal. I mean, if you just want to maintain where you are, well, you don't need top-notch people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
No, but here's the thing. He followed my, he came for growth. So at the end of the first year, he had his total value. They had been 200 million. The asset value of his banks was 200 million. At the end of the first year, it was 300 million. And so he'd gone up 100 million, but it was all mergers and acquisitions. And so I said, well, what was the key factor in freeing yourself up? He said, the executive assistant. He said, we're 100 million higher because of an executive assistant. I said, not bad, not bad. That's pretty good.
That's a good ROI. Wow.
But he it required a lot of time of his time. He was the person to do it, the mergers and acquisitions and everything else. So humans really take to this. I don't know if dogs do, but humans really take to this. That's once you get the logic of this, you say, can I start my career over again? I'd be so much further ahead. But you have to go through the learning. You have to go through the hard stuff before it gets easy.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Emily, did you want to jump in with this? I'm sure you've heard the similar version many times.
A daily conversation in my world. We just got a trademark this week for this idea that delegation is an energy management system. And so I think embracing that sort of mindset around how to think about letting go is really important. When we see people struggle, so like when we were reviewing everybody that signed up today and they said, why can't you embrace a 10x mindset, or what's keeping you? Almost everybody was answering like me, I am. And so we see that in delegation too, because a lot of the times people don't want to let go is they don't know what they're going to do instead with the time that they freed up. So, that's where unique ability comes in. And, I think that's the solution to that piece.
And it's interesting because I think, both of you are in the business of talking to entrepreneurs who are saying that they want to grow, but unless someone has a compelling vision, Dan, again, why that client joined Coach, and that's one of the things we're really great at doing is helping people clarify their goals, which is their big goals, which is amazing, especially 10X. Unless they have that, there is no incentive, as you said, Dan, to hire great people. There's no incentive to make the decision. They're still shopping. they're not actually buying, right? And they're not willing to make that investment. So I think having that big vision is an underappreciated aspect of delegation and whoing yourself up. So I think that's a really cool point, which is why 10x is so useful. 2x, you can get there by working longer and harder. If you do twice as much as what you've been doing, you can probably get there as well as your team. But if you're going to 10x, you have to look at it very, very differently. And it's not about costs, it's about investments.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to me how much this all ties together. Yeah, fascinating. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Let me just check. Yes, we like a 2-minute question or answer. And there's one question that came through, which is, can you speak to how the who benefits from helping us to get to our next 10x? So if we bring in these who's, Dan, what is the win for them and not just for us with going 10x? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, the question comes up a lot, and it seems to be so this is our 35th year of the workshop program, and it's next year is in my 50th year of coaching, but it's a constant question. It goes back to the 70s, and that is, I don't think there really aren't any great people out there, for it. And I said, oh, there's great people out there. They're just not looking for you. And great people will not join an organization if the entrepreneur doesn't have really, really big goals that they have a crucial role. Money's, is a marketplace negotiation. Money isn't the big thing. Do they get to do what they do best and be given an enormous amount of freedom and responsibility to do it? That's what attracts who's, A players will not work for a B player, a B player owner.
Yeah. So true. A player.
They're not looking for a B player owner. They're looking for an A player owner.
Yeah. So as an owner, make yourself an A player.
Yeah. I had one workshop where that was the question, and I said, well, they're looking for great people who have a much bigger future. They want to get freed up. And I said, do any of you in the room qualify for that? Because you wouldn't show up on a great person's radar. They just wouldn't be interested.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Emily and Alec, just before we jump over to Eileen to do the raffle and get the prize, do you guys see that? Because you talk to people who you're like, you're not ready for this yet. Alec, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I mean, there's culture, and what Dan's talking about A players don't want it for B players. I love the phrase. I think John Maxwell said it. You can teach what you know, but you replicate who you are. And so it all starts with the entrepreneur. But as entrepreneurs, we can realize that, be self-aware, and get better. And the other thing too is when I talk to people about budgets for their who's, they'll give me a number. So let's say it's 80 grand, and then I'll say, well, what's your budget for an A player? And it's always more. So it's people are willing to pay 10 to 20% more for an A player. And so, it's always worth hiring an A player.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the other thing is you don't have to pay it up front.
Right.
You get 26 installments. And, in my world, we get, I don't know how your world works, but there's 26 installments. How many installments would you be in before you knew you made a good decision? And if it's a really great player, it's probably, you're happy after the second or third, installment. They just say, I'll take care of that. You shouldn't be doing that. I'll take control of that. Yeah.
Excellent. Emily, what's your experience with people when they think they want to hire, but you're not sure?
Well, I always come back to the delegation side of it, and this idea that they're really scared of what's on the other side of it, potentially. So they're scared of the uncertainty of what they're going to spend their time on. They're scared of how people are going to look at them if they're not running around crazy all day long, looking so important, if they're not solving all of the problems, like what is their role? And so I think the unique ability exercise, Shannon, in your book, is a really great solve for getting over that hump, because you're never going to really truly let go and be able to trust that unless you know what you're doing with the time that you're freeing up. So having a really clear picture on that.
Could not agree more. And that's why it's so important, Dan. We talk about constantly expanding your freedom of time, of money, of relationship, and purpose. And that's your why. You know, that's your why for doing that. One last thing I want to close off with before we move to you, Eileen, and that is, and this is something, it's not my line, I wish it was, but I say to people in the workshop, it's like, if you don't have an assistant, you are one.
Mm.
And you are way too highly paid for the
Oh,
quality.
you're the highest paid assistant in the world.
And you're probably not very good at it. to be fair, you're way overpaid for, and people are like, oh my God, you're right. You know, it's a very, and they just get it because, you know, in the days when mail came, they're still opening the mail.
Yeah.
And they're still opening their email and not doing a good job triaging and all the things.
They're proofreading people's copy.
Oh, I know. So it's interesting, that whole mindset. If that doesn't get who, not how, and 10x across, I'm really not sure what does. So I love that. All right, Eileen, let's switch to you because you can kind of wrap us up and take us home. And a huge thank you, Alec and Emily, for sharing your 10x story and journey, and you can just tell the upward trajectory of both of you. And Dan, of course, to you for both illustrating 10x and who, not how.
I just want to say, Emily and Alec, now that I really know what you do, you're in real trouble.
Excellent.
Took long enough.
I'm a great referrer.
All right.
No, I mean, I always knew what you did, sort of, you know, from our conversations at the workshop, but zeroed in my mind. I'm a pretty good connector of people who should meet each other.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. I loved this conversation, and my notes page is filled up. So thank you for all the insights and perspectives you shared in the stories. Before we part ways today, because I see people starting to drop off, we did select one participant for the book bundle. So I'm excited to announce that Ravi Solanki, and I'm so sorry if I butchered your last name, is the winner of the book bundle. So Ravi, we will be in touch to get those books over to you, and congratulations. Again, thank you to all of you for joining today. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. You'll have our contact information in our follow-up email, along with bonus material and the recording from today's session. But thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day and week.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you all.